From the vistas of the Grand Tetons, we welcome you to Lost River Legends. Our motto, Ex Tenebris, Latin for out from the shadows. Here we discuss Bigfoot, skinwalkers, UFOs, aliens, and other paranormal topics. We want you to join us in seeking that which is hidden and obscured from our view. We hope you enjoy the show and encourage you to reach out to us at lostriverlegends@gmail.com to share your story and leave us a message. You can also reach us at lostriverlegends.com to find access to all of our episodes, guest bios, show notes, and our blog. Prepare yourself and get settled in and comfortable as your hosts, James and Brett, enter into the realm of shadows. Enjoy the show.
This is Stan Gordon, Pennsylvania UFO Bigfoot researcher and author, and you're listening to Lost River Legends.
Hello everyone, you're listening to Lost River Legends. This is one of your hosts, James. Brett will be joining us here shortly. Today we have Mary Joyce from Starships over Cashiers. She is the editor-in-chief of that website and has been investigating strange happenings in the southwest portion of North Carolina. She has several books and very interesting topics that she covers. Please join us in welcoming Mary Joyce to Lost River Legends. Welcome to Lost River Legends today. Our special guest is Mary Joyce from Skyships over Cashiers. She's based out of Asheville, North Carolina, and this area has a lot of high strangeness, UFO activity, underground noises, and other phenomenon happening. How are you doing today, Mary?
Just fine. Good to hear you.
Thank you for joining us. You know, looking into some of the material on your site, I'm really, it's kind of opened my eyes to some of the activity in that area. And you know, one of the most alarming things that I read was, I believe, an account of a Duke Power guy that was setting up some smart meters for the Duke Power, and he had to go in and check out some different GPS locations, and that led to some interesting findings.
Yeah, he was real surprised because he had to go through more security than he thought he would to even get in the place. And the building is only 1 story tall, so he was very surprised when he was directed to go down a hall and then down an elevator. And so he goes way down in an elevator, and it just becomes a very intriguing story. And they've been seeing all sorts of strange activity in that area. Actually, it is one of many. I've written a book called Underground Military Bases Hidden in North Carolina Mountains, and I've focused on 5 of the ones that we've learned about. And since that book came out, the one about the one that the Duke Power guy stumbled on has come out since then. So that's relatively new.
So that's one of the newer witness testimonies surrounding that. Do you know about when that occurred?
Let's see. I'm trying to remember. We posted it. We learned about it in November of this past year, and surprisingly, it is under like a water plant. It's a high, anyhow, it's a water plant, and nobody would expect something like that to be, hiding secrets. And when I mentioned the elevator at the beginning, there was one elevator, then he got off and got onto another elevator and went down a longer and faster ride than the first one. So he had no idea how deep he was, but he felt he was quite deep underneath the ground. And when he was at the lower level, he had to wait for a bit, and he was looking around, and he noticed that there was a door that was labeled kennel. And he thought that was really strange that there would be a kennel in a water facility plant. And the more he found out, I guess he actually was able to talk to a man who worked at that facility. And even though it is set up to be something for, research on water, they're also doing research on chemical weapons, and they supposedly had the livestock there as part of their testing. But it just gets really bizarre because there are a lot of humans that are disappearing, and many times the homeless people are rounded up, and there are many people who think that they're being used as human guinea pigs for some of these secret, dark experiments that are going on.
And that's a very interesting connection. I think they kind of fictionalized some of that in the latest Venom movie. They had some homeless people that were abducted and then taken to this facility, and they had this symbiote biochemical alien basically trying to merge the different intelligences and biology, and things didn't really work out for the homeless people there in that. So that's kind of interesting, a little bit of, I don't know, kind of foreshadowing or crossover.
Yeah, and part of that article that I posted, I probably should give people the name in case they want to look it up. It's called Indications of Nefarious Testing at Underground Facility. And it's in our Deep Throat testimony.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Mary, do we know any specifics about what kind of experimentation might be going on in these facilities? At least any theories, maybe?
All I can tell you, like at the Perry facility, which is the Pisgah Astronomical Research Institute, which is, again, here in the mountains of western North Carolina. Even years ago, people who were working at a nearby tree farm saw animals in cages being taken into this facility. And originally the facility was strictly for the Department of Defense, and they used it to track satellites and during the Cold War. Supposedly it's no longer doing that type of thing, and it's, again, supposedly just an astronomical research institute now. But we've talked to two people who have various forms of high security clearance, and they both confirmed that there is a city-sized facility beneath that's 6 stories deep. One of the witnesses said that they have the ability to wipe out human memories from there. And from my own experience, when I've gotten close to that facility, and I've always been with other people when I've been close to it, you begin to get this weird feeling in your head, and I've used the term people repellent. It's an electromagnetic energy of some sort that's sent out, and it makes you not want to be there. We also have had people experience that when they've gotten close to the entrance for the facility that's quite new, as far as we can tell, that's been built underneath the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And one woman who went up there, and she had a military background, so she wasn't, just a naive, off-the-street person. And she drove up there, and it was a beautiful day. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and as she got close to where this entrance is, which you cannot access, all the birds quit singing, everything got quiet, and the longer she stayed there, the more she began to get a headache, and then she stayed even longer, and she started to feel nauseated, and those terrible, icky feelings didn't disappear until she started going back down the mountain. So, like I said, I think they use people repellent to keep people away.
And that's interesting because, as you were telling me that, I've heard that before. I've heard that from your website, but it makes me wonder if the people that are working there, if they experience the same phenomenon, the repellent, the whatever's going on in your head, or if there's some kind of special shielding, a helmet or something that they're wearing, or some device that might keep things going, or is it maybe just above ground?
Would beam something out away from the facility. I mean, that's my own theory, because people would not, work under those conditions.
So it's very targeted, it seems like, to keep people away, and even animals, it sounds like, since it sounds like animal life is kind of almost pushed away from this area.
If all the birds suddenly got silent, the closer you got to the place, I would say it would have an effect on probably all living beings.
That reminds me of some of the sound cannons and the microwave weapons that are deployed for crowd control. They've used those different various weapons in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and again here on the home soil in different situations. So it's not at all surprising to me that would be the case.
I agree.
So something about the investigation of this, as you start peeling back these layers, are you ever met with any resistance or any kind of gang stalking, any kind of men in black, any off-putting behaviors from people?
I have been fortunate not to have those kind of experiences, but I also get warnings. I would say almost of a spiritual nature. For example, I was told that I should never personally go on the property at the Perry Center, and that's the one I'd mentioned to you about doing the things that can erase memory. And I was told, not to go past the front gate. So I had followed that because there's no way that I want my memory wiped out or anything else happening. And so I do take precautions. I just don't jump into everything.
Yeah, I think it's really important to listen to those warnings. I think our spirits and our bodies kind of get
if you go against those gut feelings, you probably will get in trouble. And most of us have ignored them at some point in our life or many times in our lives and found out the hard way that we should have been listening to it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Brett and I are both aligned with you on that point, that principle. I think there's a spiritual aspect to that as well. That there's definitely a creator that is watching out for us.
And what's interesting, and I'm not one who's going to jump into some religious point of view, but I did find it very interesting that a man, and I'm not going to be able to pull his name up right now, but he was the head, or maybe still the head, of a MUFON group in the Titusville, Florida area, which is near the Space Center. And he was kind of a nuts and bolts kind of guy, which many people in MUFON are. And he was just interested in the hardware. And the more he was involved with this, the more he ran into people who were having very negative experiences being abducted by aliens, and that's usually being done by greys or reptilians. And I think it's a total violation of a human being. And he found that the only people that he had met that had been able to stop those kind of abductions were those who actually turned to God, or if they're Christians, to Jesus, and asking for protection. And that seemed to be the only way they were able to stop it. I'm only giving you secondhand information from him, but I found this information very interesting. So the spiritual, there are different kinds of things going on in the world. And another example is we have a man who occasionally has been on Ancient Aliens, and he is a very liberal pastor with a what can I say, like a Unitarian church of some kind. And he had really bad experiences with a reptilian coming into his bedroom when he was sleeping at night. And he said, he was like a kid. He'd put his head under the blanket. He didn't want to see it. And reptilians don't look pretty, and I think they would scare the you-know-what out of anybody. And I met with him and another person who's involved with this website. I met with him in Asheville, and we talked to him for some time. And he began to do the spiritual kind of protection approach to all of this, and the reptilian interference stopped. Then good things began to happen. He, after that, had a very serious health condition where, his life was truly in jeopardy. And a Pleiadian type alien, which looked very human, appeared at the foot of his bed. Didn't say anything, and he didn't have any sense of fear when this being appeared. And the next morning he woke up totally healed. So there are extremes in the ET world, and I think it's best to be aligning with the ones that are positive and good.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I can actually attest to what you're talking about in the discussion that we're having about divine protection. It was a few weeks ago. I won't get into the details, but I had my own experience that I definitely knew what was going to happen, and I had a divine protection, and I was given protection from this situation that would have turned my whole world upside down. And so I can definitely attest to that fact, and that's probably something we're going to be sharing in an upcoming episode about what happened to me. But you know, it kind of ties into the whole free will and our agency and whatnot. And but yeah, that's interesting that there's that connection that you've made there. And so with some of these situations that you've experienced, what's something out there? It doesn't have to be a specific topic necessarily, but what's something out there that right now it's kind of the hot topic? It's something that's on your mind. Some of this activity that you're investigating. What's something that stands out to you that just won't go away?
I think what is at the top of the list of mysteries on the planet, in fact, I think you have to leave the planet to find bigger mysteries than the ones that are being discovered in Antarctica. You know, that's sort of like one of our last frontiers on the planet itself for great mysteries to be solved. And so we've done quite a bit of that, as much as you can without being somebody, you know, in the snow down in Antarctica. Google can actually be quite helpful, and I've gotten images of at least 3 entrances going into Antarctica. And what I've done in each of those situations is I give people the coordinates so they can find them for themselves, because you know, there's so many people playing games with Photoshop, and so people need to be able to find evidence for themselves. And these entrances are not little. I mean, there's one that's 295 feet at its widest point. And to put it in perspective, a Boeing 747 is 196 feet across, so that means one of those jets could fly into this entrance and have 50 feet off of each wingtip. So that's a pretty big entrance. And there's another entrance that has what looks to be like a metal dome awning over it. And another one, let's see, it looks to be like a runway. You can see things that's easy to imagine them being runway lights. And then it runs right up to another good-sized entrance, and it's 149 feet across. And then if I compare that one to an 320 Airbus, and it has a wingspan of 117 feet. So you can see 117 feet could easily fly into something or roll into an entrance that's 149 feet across. The thing that makes this additionally interesting is that it's located, the closest known base in Antarctica is 215 miles away from this. So it wouldn't be like being used by one of our research facilities.
You know, that subject is really holding my attention lately with some of the witness testimonies and things that are coming out from there. Lyndon Moulton Howe most recently is releasing a Spartan 1 and Spartan 2 codenamed people who were contractors, military guys that went down there and had different experiences. You have the Above Majestic stuff. It's really hard to know how to sift some of this because we can't go to Antarctica. We can't be there. But there are these things, like you said, you can go on Google Earth, you can find these coordinates, lock them in, and look at them for yourself and kind of draw some of your own conclusions in conjunction with some of the other data that's out there.
Check out some of this activity in Antarctica. I have been using Antarctica and then colon followed by a title so that you can type in Antarctica in our search bar and a whole list of different things will come up for people to check into. And I think we really should be paying attention because back in 2016, which is not that long ago, we had all these world leaders going down to Antarctica. And you just have to stop and wonder, why are old guys like that are in their 70s and 80s going down there to the most inhospitable part of our planet? And John Kerry and Buzz Aldrin are certainly two of the ones that made the national news. But there's many other leaders, including like the leader of China and the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. I found it very intriguing that before he's referred to as Patriarch Kirill, I found it very interesting. He met with Pope Francis before he went down there, and they met for 3 hours in Cuba directly before he left. This was unusual for two things. One, with the timing of his trip to Antarctica, and the other, that the two leaders of the two variations of the Catholic Church had never met before.
Yeah, and that's something that is really catching a lot of attention. We have the different reports of Buzz Aldrin actually getting sick when he went down there, and some tie-ins. Dr. Sala has done a lot of extensive research on the different contractors, military contractors that have been down there. And in the past, a lot of them have been aerospace contractors. And now it's kind of shifted more to biotech. And that lends a lot of credence to maybe some kind of a viral outbreak or some kind of contagion that they're trying to figure out or contain.
They also could be doing things of quite a different nature. A wonderful source of information, and one that I trust a whole lot, is a man by the name of William Tompkins. He's written books. He has he's no longer living. He died, I think, not long ago. I think he was like 94. And he was in Navy intelligence during World War II, but he was also at the top ranks of NASA and worked directly with Wernher von Braun and, other scientists at that level. And in his books, he talks about working with Pleiadian ETs who provided so much of the technical information to NASA for our ships to be so successful. He is a wonderful source. And if I didn't have such faith in his credibility, I would find it so hard to believe some of the things that he has shared with the public. And one of those is that the reptilians have had an underground facility there for who knows how long. And they were formed, they are formed in caverns that were created by volcanoes that are still very active, and they are beneath the surface of Antarctica. In fact, the most active volcanic region in the world is in western Antarctica. And so the reptilians have been there. They align themselves with the Nazis, or the Nazis align themselves with the reptilians, even before the outbreak of World War II. And they were operating out of these underground facilities in Antarctica. The Nazis were then given smaller caverns by the reptilians, and they would access them by U-2 boats or submarines that would then go into the rivers that flow beneath Antarctica. And like I said, if I didn't have a great deal of respect for William Tompkins, it would be hard to swallow some of these stories when you first hear them. But I think Linda Moulton Howe is a wonderful one who's doing some serious interviews with people who may very well have true knowledge of what's really happening down there.
Yeah, I've been following some of the Bill Tompkins stuff. I actually just bought his book and started reading that, and even just the prologue and the first chapter is a mind-blowing expose on his career and how that was kind of I would say railroaded, in a positive way, to interact with these beings, and also to use his talent, because his talent was remarkable, to be able to look at a ship and remember every
the guy was a genius for sure.
Every detail. So he definitely had a lot of contributions, and according to David Wilcock, he, up until his dying days, was still contributing to some of the different plans and some of the different designs for various aircraft, whether they be here or interplanetary. So that's a pretty remarkable story. If you haven't heard of William Tompkins, he also gives an awesome account of the Battle of L.A. He lived there during that period and witnessed that. And that's actually a very, that's one of the largest mass sightings on record.
If we do have at least one article about him on our website, and you can find it one of two ways. Probably if you just type in his name, William Tompkins or Tompkins, in our search bar, you can find it. But if you go the route of typing in Antarctica, then it's colon and it says reptilian aliens help Nazis. And that would be a quick, easy introduction to some of what's going on down there.
Yeah, those are some great stories, and his contributions are definitely recognized by folks who appreciate his work and his sacrifice.
And so he was in a position to be able to talk about these things. I mean, when you get past 90, what's somebody going to do to you? Whereas many of the people who are speaking out, according to what's going on right now, are people who are still young in their profession, and for various reasons they do not want to be identified. So it's nice to get information from somebody who doesn't have to use an alias.
Sure. And another interesting tidbit about Antarctica, James and I were talking this week, and we found a news article about how, right now David Wilcock is talking about the alliance and how all these different things are tying in together with politically and geopolitically, and with Q and QAnon and all this stuff. But they're talking about how the alliance is actually pushing for official disclosure about Antarctica. People say that Atlantis is up there and all the technology and the buildings and different things that are buried. That the alliance is pushing for this full disclosure of Antarctica because they're hanging different threats, exposure of deep state activity over their heads as kind of a bait. Have you heard anything about that?
I have, and I haven't sorted it out enough to be able to tell you what my opinion is on it. From what I know at this point, I take it all with a grain of salt. That is one possible reason for some of the things that are happening. I'm not sure it's necessarily the only viable explanation. So
yeah.
Until I have a better handle on it, I certainly wouldn't write about it. But if I get something that really is very convincing, then I will.
Sure.
So I don't know what to tell you on that. Some of these stories about the cabal have proven to be wrong in the past, and so I'm not quick to jump and say that's what's going on.
And to kind of
the cabal is real. Don't get me wrong about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just the certain theories that are out there about different nefarious activities that might be happening.
What happens on the internet is people read one story or one person's theory, then somebody picks it up, and then somebody copies that one. And you always, whenever possible, you have to get back to the most original source, because so much is, one theory compounded by another, woven together with another, and I'm not sure we're getting a real clear picture.
And part of that, I think, also has to do with confirmation bias. We want to think that someone is routing out the cabal, as you'd call it, and we want to think that good would triumph in the end, and this sometimes does lead us to want to see a level of disclosure, whatever version of that, or some level of the different tribunals that are allegedly happening. Those are all things that we want in our hearts for evil to be punished, but it's so hard to confirm whether or not it's happening.
Speaking of the cabal, we did have somebody who had been in security and was involved with the cabal. And there's two articles in this same section I've referred to as the Deep Throat testimonies. And there's one in there. It's called The Cabal, Exposed by a High-Ranking Whistleblower. If you're at all interested in the Cabal, you might very well want to read that.
Now, some of these sources that you've found regarding the Cabal, do they confirm some of the nefarious activities that they are alleged to participate in?
This article gives you a better idea of the tiers within the Cabal and who's at what level. And basically, the ones at the very top are a very small number, and they actually are afraid because there's less than 70 people that run it all. And there is one who is a member of the Cabal who lives in a trailer. And I thought, one that you tote around the country. And when I first heard that, I said, you got to be kidding me. These people, have all the money and luxury in the world if they want it. Why in the world would he live that way? And basically he was telling me that the ones at the very top, the ones that have the true control, do try to live in an unnoticeable way. They're not the rich ones that are at the, second and third tier down. One of the guys who is part of the Cabal, he drives a Chevrolet or a Buick and lives in a house that's, like 1,600 square feet because they don't want attention brought to them. If they want to, enjoy the luxuries of life, they have the money, they can go to the finest hotel or restaurant or, the fanciest island in the world if they want to. But their everyday existence is quite ordinary so that they won't attract attention.
Yeah, that's really interesting you say that. I actually lived that way mobily with my family for, over 18 months. And so I never, ever would have suspected that someone in one of the same RV campgrounds as me was a member of the elite. So,
well, the chances you actually ran into this guy are probably very slim, but nevertheless, the whole idea of it's surprising.
Just that whole idea of hiding in plain sight.
Correct.
It's very clever. With Google, like you said before, with Google Earth, there's a lot of things it can do for us. If these people bought up a whole chain of islands, I mean, you could use those satellite images and look right at their villas and things like that. So that also lends more credence to some of the underground activity being out of the sight of satellites, being out of plain sight and blending in with areas such as national parks. I mean, I would never have guessed that the Smoky Mountains had something like of that level and that caliber underneath.
Well, it may have all started because underneath these mountains, there's a lot of natural, open cave structures which could be more easily expanded upon. That might be part of the reason that it was started. But I've gotten this information from many sources, including military sources, and it sounds like there is a maglev rail system beneath the ground that connects all through the Appalachian Mountains, starting up in outside of Washington D.C. and Virginia.
We've seen some footage of people driving into some of these Appalachian area complexes, if you will, and they drive for miles and miles and miles of I think maybe in Arkansas and Missouri. There's a lot of limestone, but these just go on forever.
And not only do you need like the underground caverns, which you do not need any longer because the boring machines that they have created now are huge. They're like, railroad track or railroad car size and bigger, and they can eat through the ground at like 7 miles in a day. And so I'm quite confident those are being used to create an underground transportation system.
Yeah, that's something that Phil Schneider talked a lot about, was these boring machines and how they basically ran on nuclear energy and use lasers to cut through and bore through. Is there a new technology that you're referring to?
I don't think that type of technology is really new anymore, and it's been used for years. I did find it interesting that the Perry facility that I mentioned earlier, There's new activity going on there, and I learned about it from somebody who lives in the area. And again, I got on Google and started doing my own searching, and found a new hole in the ground, which it's quite large because there's two tarps that cover most of it. You can see down between them that there's clearly a big hole down there. And to make it more convincing, in the Google images, I found these huge dump trucks. I also found excavator equipment, and then you can see evidence of where they're taking the dirt, the soil that they're finding beneath the ground, and bringing it up, and then they're spreading it out over a hillside, so it looks like, so it, will disappear and not be obvious what they're doing. But I went and got a photo of a soil sample from that area, and the topsoil is dark, and the soil down deep is very light in color. What's being spread out over on the ground is very light in color, so it indicates that they're digging deep.
That reminds me of a story of from David Adair when he was young, went to Area 51, and the floor dropped out in the hangar, and they go down, and it's a big cavernous areas, and it just went, for as far as his eye could see with the curvature of the earth, and he had
my goodness.
He had the audacity to ask, "Well, what'd you do with all the dirt?" they got
Did he
pretty.
get an answer?
Well, they got pretty mad at him. He decided to change the subject.
I hear you. There was also a lot of suspicious dirt around the Denver airport when that was being built, or it was going on for a very long time. So that's another mysterious place. I want to bring up another thing. You were asking, what's high on my list of interest right now. We are continuing to get Bigfoot stories here from the mountains. And there's a friend of mine that I've known since, decades. And she started her film career at Universal Studios as a lowly assistant production person. And then she worked her way up as a production manager for Disney and Universal and a whole bunch of other different film industry outlets. And so she has followed our website since we started it in 2008. And she started out using the information we had found about Bigfoot. And we have, the last count, we have like 58 different articles on Bigfoot. And so she took that information, and then she came and visited here in North Carolina so we could show her the actual places where Bigfoot has been repeatedly seen. And the script has just been finished. And so if anybody is interested, if anybody's in the film business, we're now at the point where we're going to try to get this information out to people in the business to see if it might be able to become an actual movie. And on the homepage right now, at the very top, it says brand new Bigfoot movie script. And you can learn about that. And anybody who might be in the film industry, there is a way to contact Holly Rourke, who is the primary writer of the movie script. And they can get a copy of the script if they like.
That's interesting. So in this script, you said it's on your website?
On our website, we've done an article about this movie script, which we had been working on with Holly Rourke, and it's just been completed. And so that's the reason that's at the top of our new articles on the homepage.
Okay. So about Bigfoot, you said that there's a lot of sightings of Bigfoot in that area. Is there any connection that you know of, or any data that you can point to that suggests that there might be a connection between these Bigfoot sightings and these deep underground bases that you're referring to?
I see more connections with UFOs. We have lots of UFO sightings in this area, and that's actually why we started the website, skyshipsovercashiers.com, because we were seeing so many over the mountaintop town of Cashiers. But in the same general areas, we are, getting the Bigfoot reports. So
Sure.
It's more likely there's a connection that way than there is with the underground facilities, but I could be wrong about that.
Sure. Yeah, and we're just about ready to release our latest episode where we talked with Stan Gordon, and there's a high correlation between UFO sightings in his neck of the woods in Pennsylvania, and with Bigfoot. And so there's some really strange phenomenon and some interesting connections there that I would really like to understand more about.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I can conclusively say that there is a connection that way. I know that somebody like Kawani, who's been a primary investigator of the Bigfoot for decades, he indicates there's a connection. And like I said, just because there's so many sightings in this area, there very well could be. But at the same time, the information I've gotten is that Bigfoot have been here on the planet before humans.
Yeah, it's so hard to know where to place things that are so unknown.
Sometimes we just have to keep stuff in this category of we don't know for sure which way it is. Sometimes we're too quick to make a conclusion.
Right, and the hard thing is to not jump to that conclusion and to not categorize it.
There's something in human nature that wants to identify things and make it clear and organize it and, make sense out of everything. And sometimes we just can't absolutely do that. In fact, we can stop the progress of finding the real answers if we do close our minds too quickly.
Yep, I agree. And I think that that's, in our pursuit of this information, that we have to take everything in and kind of weigh it and look at how, we do like to see how it fits into our paradigm, but we also have to, shift our paradigm to understand some of these things a little bit deeper. But again, we still also have to decide we're not always going to know, and we have to be okay with that.
We will be posting a new story this coming week. I'm not sure which day the webmaster will get to it, but it is a woman who lives in territory where Bigfoot lives. And once she and her family moved there, she had a dream about a Bigfoot. And the very next day, she and her family went hiking in the Joyce-Kilmer National Forest, and they came upon a giant footprint by a stream that was flowing through the forest. And since then, she's become more acutely aware of the Bigfoot, and she just sent us pictures this week where overnight at one of the tent-like structures, stick structures, was formed, and she had walked that land the day before, and the next day, here's a tent-like structure that's 8 feet tall. To make it doubly interesting, when she looked up, the trees above the tent were poplars that had been bent in arches over the tent. And so she had a dream about the Bigfoot. I think she'd been awakened with the wood knocking that morning, and then she finds this tent. So from the different witnesses who've interacted with the Bigfoot, most Bigfoot don't want to scare people to death. They know that their size and even the energy that they send out can be too intense for people. So they will start acclimating humans in a very gentle, thoughtful way. They'll come through in dreams, or they will speak to them first and let them feel safe before they ever physically let some human see them. Not because they're afraid of us, but because they don't want us humans to react badly to them.
Yeah, that ties in with a lot of some of the surprising accounts that we've heard. One of them more recently was the Sasquatch Chronicles episode 500 with Les Stroud. Surprisingly, he did talk about kind of this mind speak ability, and they basically were saying, "Hey, we're here if you want to meet us." And so that interactivity, but also that choice to be involved or not. So it's fascinating to see some of those correlations.
Yeah, one man who has, he's had the Bigfoot speak to him, and this has gone on for some time. He seems to be connected to Bigfoot at many levels, and he felt like he was ready to see one. So finally, the Bigfoot stepped out so he could see him. He said the energy coming from him just about made its insides burst because it was so intense, and the Bigfoot immediately backed off and mentally told him he wasn't ready to see him.
Yeah, and there's the different accounts with what people think is infrasound, where it definitely gives them a sick feeling or kind of disassociate with their surroundings. So those are some commonalities that might be lending some credence to the things you're saying there.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah, it's an interesting subject, and the research that came out, the DNA research that began to come out in 2012, shows that a Bigfoot is a human on the maternal side and some unknown species on the paternal side. And so in some wild, crazy respect, they are cousins. And there have been hunters who have gone to shoot a Bigfoot, and they've seen the Bigfoot's face in their scope, and it has had such human qualities that they haven't been able to pull the trigger. So I think that we need to, I think we need to be more compassionate toward the Bigfoot. The only times I ever hear about violence with them is when usually human hunters are hunting them down or shooting at them. But I hear lots of good stories about them rescuing people and sometimes making friends with them.
yeah, and to be clear, there are definitely very very violent encounters. There are some very aggressive encounters. They're so it does kind of run all over the map.
But I do think that those are the minority. And again, the only ones that I personally know about have been involving human hunters. So, and sadly, most of the movies that have come out, with the exception of Harry and the Hendersons, have been portraying the Bigfoot as a monster and something creepy and scary and violent. And that just makes that image more dominant than it should be. And that's one of the reasons that we've done this script, because we hope to make it, or we hope it portrays the Bigfoot in a much more compassionate way.
Well, that's something we'll have to check out. We can link up to that here in our episode notes. Now, you did say that there was a strong correlation with some UFO sightings and Bigfoot. What kind of UFOs are we talking about? Are we talking about light? Are we talking about actual saucers? What's kind of some of the descriptions you're getting?
We have seen such an array of UFOs. We've seen the ones that everybody knows about, the saucer-shaped ones. But back in 2015, we were getting, I wasn't, somebody else who lives in Cashiers was getting pictures of the oddest UFOs you have ever seen. I've never even seen them on the internet anywhere. And they looked like giant asteroids, but they were hovering close, relatively close to the ground. They would stay in one place. They did emanate light, but they reflected light from the ground. And we have photos of those, and they're just, mind-boggling because they're so different. And then we've posted pictures. Well, I'll stick to the ground here. We have them where they're like multiple tiers or levels. The balls or the spheres are very, very common. They're just not all the same.
With Bigfoot, a lot of what I've heard are orbs, especially in dense forested areas. Is that something that you're seeing?
We have reports of orbs in the same area. I tend to think those are more spiritual beings. I think we did a story many, many years ago, and it was at a meditation thing in the Far East. And the bigger the crowd got and the more the meditation went on, the orbs just began to fill the picture to the point where you almost couldn't see the people anymore. And so they were they're disembodied souls. And that's what I think most orbs are. Of course, the word orb is used in different ways. It's not just used one way. Something that's round can be referred to as an orb, and it can be of a very solid nature. But the orbs of light in the forest, the orbs of light, like the Brown Mountain lights, those are like translucent images.
Wow. Well, now some of the UFO experiences that people are having, is there any connection with any military bases in the area or any military personnel?
Absolutely.
So that's fascinating to me.
Yeah, we have UFOs that have been associated or seen around, maybe all of them, but We've seen them a lot around the Perry facility. They've been around the flying over the Smoky Mountain National Park where there's a facility. There's a place called Sugarloaf Mountain, which is near Lake Lure or Chimney Rock State Park. And, UFOs were seen over that mountaintop where clearly there is an entrance. So, yeah, I do believe that there is a connection. There's a lake that's just east of just west of the Perry facility, and people say they've seen UFOs go into the lake and come out of that lake. So that might be a way of entering an underground facility. Who knows? But, I think there definitely is a connection. I do think that some aspects of our military are involved with some aspects of the ET world.
Now, you said earlier that you personally haven't had any of the intimidation factors. Have any of your witnesses had any personnel or people intimidating them?
Everybody that I have talked to has gone at great lengths to be very, very cautious. When I was working at a place in town where I had a lot of interaction with people, I had various people come in, and I would learn after the fact that they kept coming in to talk to me because they were checking me out to see if they felt I was trustworthy to share their stories. And so they're very cautious. One man who has, high security clearance, he gave us a statement about the underground facility beneath Perry. He gave us a written statement. He made sure that he wrote it in a style that was totally different than his normal way of writing. He had it delivered to me by somebody else. He just did all sorts of things to make sure it couldn't be traced back to him. So I think the people who have been bold enough to share their stories with me have also been smart enough to be very careful about, how they reveal their information.
With witness testimony coming from someone that is participating in one of these facilities, is that giving you more of a clear picture of what's happening?
To some degree, but even then, they will still limit what they probably know. Sometimes if they reveal everything they know, then they would be pointing the finger at themselves.
And do we know which branches of the military perhaps are involved? Are we talking Air Force, Navy?
I do not know. It seems like the Air Force is involved with most military UFO things around the country, which makes sense, actually. The facility beneath Mount Mitchell, which is the largest mountain east of the Mississippi, one of our witnesses talked about the UN troops being there. Excuse me. So, the UN's quite a different subject.
That actually is, and that's the first time I've heard of any UN involvement. That actually kind of makes me scratch my head a little bit.
In that same article, but in the book when I've written about that, I have something about the world, what do they call it? The World Heritage Treaty or whatever, but it's where land within our country is being protected, supposedly for very noble reasons, but it ends up so that we do not own our land, and that applies to Mount Mitchell, and it also applies to the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. That opens the door for UN troops to practice on land that's supposedly U.S. People want to get into that in some bigger way. In the book, Underground Military Bases, there's a whole chapter on that.
Yeah, I believe that is called the UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And there's many of those around the world, but very strangely, some of these military things are happening in that kind of protected territory.
Well, with things like Agenda 21 and the different nature preserves and buffer zones that they're creating, that does allow for a little bit more operational area. If they're running drills or if they have bases underneath, these all are kind of some pieces to the puzzle.
That's true. And at the underneath Sugarloaf Mountain, the government has bought up land adjacent to this mountain, so there's only one way to access it now. And even that has changed. When I first went there, it was a hairpin single-lane gravel road, and there were only 8 houses almost at the top of the mountain, period. Since then, they've come in and they've expanded the road. They've gone in there and put in major electrical power lines, the kind that have to be held up by cement poles, and the cables are like 10 inches in diameter. And the only thing that's obvious at the top of the mountain are 8 homes. So why would you have that kind of power, going up to the top of this mountain? And at one point when these lines were being put in, one of the witnesses counted about 20 of those Pike Energy or electrical trucks that you see whenever there's a disaster and all the electrical trucks come in. I mean, clearly it's providing power for something much bigger than a few houses.
Yeah, that's a strong correlation there, and there's even a high correlation with UFO sightings around energy areas, high energy areas where you have a lot of different UFO sightings. Sorry about that. Hello? Hello? Hey, Mary, can you hear us?
Hello?
Hi, can you hear us now?
Hello? I can now. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, bugger. As soon as I said UFOs and electrical power lines and stuff, it it pooped out on us.
It went out, huh?
Interesting. And I know our time's almost up. And I wanted to ask kind of a final question here. For you personally, have you witnessed any high strangeness, whether it be lights in the sky, a UFO, anything connected with the underground bases, or even a Bigfoot sighting?
Yes, to all of them.
Really? Okay. Are these recent? Are these recent sightings and experiences that you've had?
Which subject do you want me to talk about?
Let's talk.
Go ahead, you pick it.
Okay, let's talk about UFOs.
Okay. Those are just so common, and when you just see them up in the sky, as a light, and it'll stay there a little bit, and then it'll disappear or blink out. I mean, there's a lot of that. I don't consider that dramatic at all, but it's common and it's often. When I lived on Cocoa Beach, I actually had an easier time seeing the UFOs because right now I'm wedged between 2 mountain ridges, and unless a UFO goes directly overhead, I can't see it from where I am. But down there, when I was between Patrick Air Force Base and the Space Center, I saw a lot of UFO activity, and also got confirmation from people who worked at the Space Center about the reality of the UFOs. That doesn't exactly answer your question.
No.
More recently, I've seen the cave, one of the caves where the Bigfoot hang out or take shelter. It was kind of an interesting day because I went up with a mountain man to the top of a ridge. We took a gravel dirt road to get there, and then we walked about a half mile to get to where this cave was. And when we started in that direction, I heard this mechanical bird-type sound. It didn't quite sound like a real bird. And then in the direction that we were walking, it was like an answer with the same kind of bird sound, and then everything got silent. And the conclusion of both of us was that one Bigfoot was letting the rest of the Bigfoot know that 2 humans were on the way. Watch out.
Yeah, and that seems like it's very common when people experience anything that's with sound, any communication between Bigfoot. It's usually warning others to take cover or be quiet or both.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting, though. That's very
now,
interesting.
I've seen the Bigfoot prints. There's an area where they commonly they bound down a steep mountain where there's caves at the very top, and then way down below there's a pond. There's also an apple tree that they seem to be to like when the apples are ripe. And so on more than one occasion, I've seen the footprints, and they're usually kind of in the soft, muddy dirt. But clearly you can see it's something large that's been bounding up the steep slope because the distance between the footprints is so great. So I've seen that kind of thing.
With the footprints, have you been able to get any casts?
No, and for the simple reason that where we've been able to see them repeatedly has been in very mucky soil, where it's like debris and grass and mud, and it doesn't. You can actually see where sometimes the footprint has slid a little bit. It's not good for casting. And that I don't even know if castings are very convincing to people anymore. But no, we haven't done that.
You know, I've seen we've visited with Dr. Meldrum down in Pocatello.
He certainly has a collection of them, doesn't he?
He does. He has quite a wide array. Some of the more interesting ones are where you can see the foot slip in the mud. Maybe it was a little bit smoother or more clay-like mud, but it was pretty defined. And so, yeah, when it comes to convincing people with the casts, I don't necessarily think, skeptics will be skeptics, but with his expertise where he kind of knows some of the anatomy, some of the different things to look for, the mid-tarsal break.
For example, with the footprint, not the footprints, the fingerprints, they have the whorls marks like we do, but they are totally different shape. And there's an expert that was out in Texas, and we've done an article on him so long ago, his name is gone from my brain. But we have photographs of the fingerprints, and you can see how different they are. But those are not castings. Those are where they've left a print that can be photographed.
Yeah,
which to me is actually a little bit more convincing.
Yeah, the dermal ridges, when you see the dermal ridges, that to me is just that's a very strong confirmation that these things are physical.
Especially since they're similar, but they are different. And I agree with you. I think that's a real good indication that they're real. There's a man that I've had contact with. His name is David Ellis. He was a co-founder of the Olympic Project out in Washington. And it's a group of investigators who are just dedicated to coming up with the truth about Bigfoot. And he sent me photos of a casting of the children Bigfoots. I mean, he's gotten the adults and the medium size and the children. And he's also gotten castings of footprints that have 6 digits. And people think Bigfoot are all the same, but they're not. There are those with 6 fingers, 5 fingers, which is the most common, 4 fingers. Some say 3 fingers. That may or may not be the same kind of creature. Really would have a little bit more doubt about that. But they're not the same, and they're not all the same size. The ones in Florida, which are also known as swamp apes, are the smallest. The ones here where we are here in North Carolina are like medium size for a Bigfoot, and the ones out west are the ones that are the largest.
I'm glad you brought that up because that is something that we've discussed on our show before. We've had Duke Sullivan on and Matt from Matt Squatch Presents, and we've discussed those different types of Bigfoot. I think that those are, it's important to bring up that there are variances within that subject. So thank you for covering that. I did want to kind of visit that subject.
And one other thing with that, one of the people that we've contacted about the Bigfoot is Joan Ocean. And Joan Ocean is a world authority on dolphins. She lives in Hawaii. And somebody here on the mainland wanted to learn how to communicate with the Bigfoot better and figured that Joan would be a good one to learn something from. And she actually made a trip and spent some time here on the mainland. And she connected with some very intelligent Bigfoot. She refers to them as Sasquatch. It's the same thing. It doesn't matter. It's just easier to say Bigfoot. And one of the ones she contacted was a female Sasquatch who was known as a medicine woman among her tribe of Bigfoot. And I just pulled this up so I could read it. It's very short. The Bigfoot were actually able to communicate in writing with Joan. She would leave a notebook out so that they could write things down. And this is real quick. And it says, Water Woman, which is what they named Joan because she spends so much time in the water. Water Woman want to cross salt water. We cannot cross salty water where sun go down. Too far. One who draws will make pictures that move in box with white-haired tall man. Tell our story of life and God's world. And then a male Bigfoot in the same tribe did a number of drawings on a notebook page, and he drew the constellation of the Pleiades. He did something that looked like Ogham writing from the old Irish, where they have a horizontal line with vertical lines that are above and below the line for their letters. And he drew mountains and sunshine and something that looks like maybe something flying through the air. And it's next to the constellation of the Pleiades, which, makes you kind of think, was he trying to communicate that that's where they're from? Don't know. But that shows a very high level of intelligence, higher than many of the Bigfoot, but I don't think any of the Bigfoot are totally dumb.
Wow. Do we have scans or pictures of this writing?
Yes. If you, the easiest thing for people to remember is just type in Joan Ocean's name, and we've done, I think, 2 articles on her, and one is titled Sasquatch Befriend Dolphin Expert, and that has the actual writing that you can see for yourself.
Well, that's super exciting. That's a piece of information that I have not heard before. I know that Kiwani, he has some connections there and that kind of seem to overlap, but this is a little bit different angle there with the communication being written.
And she'd be a wonderful person for, if you could ever get her on the show. She's just a delight to talk with or email with, and you can see why creatures like the Bigfoot would be willing to be opened up with, or would open up with her.
Fascinating stuff. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on. You've really enlightened me with just a vast array of information. I know I'm going to be spending a lot more time on your site and reading these different accounts that you have. For just really quick, if you could plug your website name and your book names really quick, because I believe those are available on Amazon, are they not?
That's correct. The website is skyshipsovercashiers.com. If you type in Skyships Over Cashiers, it'll probably come up. And Cashiers is spelled like a cashier at the store. Skyshipsovercashiers.com. The 3 books I have in print right now, one is Underground Military Bases Hidden in the North Carolina Mountains. One is Cherokee Little People Were Real. And the third one's quite different. It's called Tangible Evidence of Jesus. The whole title is Tangible Evidence of Jesus Left Behind for Us to Find. And it's archaeological and scientific information that adds a whole new dimension beyond the Bible about the man we know as Jesus. And if people want a quick summary of them, again, go to the website, open up Editor's Corner, and scroll way down to the bottom, and there's a quick summary of each of those books, just like a paragraph. There's also a sample chapter from the Tangible Evidence book.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that, and thanks so much for coming on today and taking the time to do so.
And good luck with all your own research. Good luck with it all.
Thank you so much. Well, folks, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. It was our delight to have Mary Joyce on. We'd love to hear what you think about the show, and if you have any suggestions, head on over to our website. It's lostriverlegends.com. We have a contact form. We have several ways of getting a hold of us on our social media. All of that is linked out there. Thanks so much, and make sure you have yourself a good day.